Hello, welcome to the Marte Method. I am Jairo Marte. I'm going to briefly talk about what landed us in Spain, what the thought process was there as far as choosing Spain. It was something that we had thought about years ago during our retirement planning. Um, and we ended up on Spain only because living in New York for, a few years when I was growing up, along with Miami, there was many cultures, many ethnicities, tons of different groups of people, but it was very rare that you would see a Spaniard or groups of Spaniards around. So it got me thinking, what is it that Spain is doing that they're not, migrating here and so forth. So we looked into it. We liked what we saw on paper. So we figured it was worth pursuing. That was a goal for later. We were like, when we retire in our 60s and everything. And then COVID hit, and that you get hit with your mortality at that point when something like that happens. So it was a matter of, okay, let's not wait for retirement. Let's try to make that happen sooner. But there was always something in the way. There was always some sort of obstacle, be it student loans. We had just purchased a house and had our kids and everything, so that was another pause there. And there were a lot of other things along with it, with work and everything. I had just started my business. My wife was just started her new. At that point, it was new. Her path during to weight loss. So there were a lot of changes that were preventing us from moving forward. And so now we have the opportunity to do so. So why not push that timeline up? And then still we looked at Spain, but it was a hard road to land back on Spain because there was a process there. And I'll explain that in just a minute. So we started off with Spain and under the non-lucrative visa, in which Heather at that point didn't like because you can't work for the year of the first year that you're under the non-lucrative. Is mainly for retirees and people with passive income or, enough in savings to survive during that year and after. But it's mostly geared toward retirees. We had just missed the golden visa opportunity, which we wouldn't have hit anyway because you needed to buy property, I think, for like $500,000, and we don't have that. So non-lucrative visa it was. But again, Heather didn't like it. It was a little stress-inducing for her at that point in time. But we kept looking for other options as far as how we can get to Spain. We looked into the student visa option, which would have worked, but there were a few caveats to it. It was great because it provided a visa where you can study abroad through a consulate-approved school with consulate-approved courses, which we were looking into learning Spanish, which, learn the language while you're there, along with going through a TEFL or a TEFL approved course as well to then be able to be paid to teach English. So you're taking your Spanish approved course. You can either do it at a school and learn Spanish or do it at some TEFL schools have approved course loads so that you can study Spanish, teach English, and get paid. The only problem with it is that if I was the main applicant, my wife and my two kids will have to have waited a year before they can fill out a family reunification form in order to join me. And that was not a great option there. That plan was no longer viable because it's like D&D. You never split the party, So that was out the door. So then we were back to the non-lucrative visa. We did look into digital nomad visas, but there were certain things with that as well. If it works out for you, great. Um, you would have to have for Spain. And again, you can look into any other kind of visa. They all have similar types. It's just a matter of the parameters. For Spain, with the digital nomad visa, you would have had to work in the field in that profession for the last 3 years. And there were certain other things along with it. We kind of stopped along there because we're not remote workers or anything. And, that was it. I really do hope these videos are educational enough to where you can see the process. You can apply it to anything in life, really. You set a goal and you take the little baby steps in order to reach that goal. And like I said, this is something that we were looking at years ago, and it's gotten us this far. We're finally actually doing it. It is tiring, though. It is a lot, but it's possible. Just like anything else in life, it is possible. It is doable. So if this is inspirational, or if this gives you, an idea or a process on how to get something done, then do it. Okay, you'll be better off for it. Okay. Then we started looking at other countries because the non-lucrative visa was looking a little scary for Heather, which was within reason because the not working for a year was a little harrowing, not knowing what is coming after that first year, not knowing what the job market is like. We've never been, we're just blindly going. So we have no idea what is in store for us after that. But it was still a good option to go with as far as an NLV, because all you needed to prove was you had enough in savings or somewhere to prove that you had enough to survive over there. Luckily for us, again, when we had the conversation years ago, that made us start saving aggressively, a little bit by bit, and we managed to get enough and pad enough in order to do this. Now, every visa has their different requirements. The ones I mentioned before, the non-lucrative, has their limit requirements as far as your income, along with the digital nomad visa and the student visa as well. They each have different requirements that must be met financially in order to get approved for the visa. The non-lucrative visa, for the main applicant, it was a $28,000 threshold. They base it on They base that number on their minimum wage salary for the year. That's enough, their cost of living, that covers that cost of living for the year. So theirs is 28,000. So main applicant, if I was the main applicant, I would need to prove I had 28,000. Spouse would need to prove half of that. And then the children or dependents would require a quarter of that. So with me, my wife, my 2 kids, they made one person, I made another person. So it came out to 56,000 for the year is what we needed to prove. Along with proof that we will not work for that term for the visa, along with a couple other things, but we'll leave that for another video. So then we started looking at other countries because she wasn't too keen on the idea of the non-lucrative at that point. So we looked at Portugal. We looked at a few other ones based on a few different criteria, which I completely forgot to mention that on how we landed on Spain was because we had a whole list of things that needed to be met for the country to be, Marte approved. Like that was a long list. We went through about 8 different countries, I want to say. Then there were certain criteria that needed to be met for which countries were options to look at, in which initially we started off with, okay, it needs to be warm because I got that old cold, COVID hit and my body temperature regulator went down the drain. I used to be a furnace and now I'm cold all the time and it stinks and I hate it. But we were looking for someplace warm for that fact. So we talked about the Caribbean, but that was out of the question because Heather didn't want to go through hurricanes, which is fine. That would have been an easy option because with my family being Dominican, I probably could have been grandfathered in, but it's all right. I can get her stance on the hurricanes. That's not something that I would want to go through either. We looked at then some of the other Caribbean islands that had golden visa options because those are also great options if you have enough money. And I think Dominica was one where it was like only $100,000 to buy into it with property, but there weren't a lot of properties available because the island's like this big and their inventory was low. So there was no way to really utilize that. There were a couple other Caribbean islands that were on the lower end of the Caribbean, closer to South America, because with the storm tracker, that's where less storms were heading. So that's a safer area as far as storms go. But again, low inventory, so it makes it a little difficult to look for property. We looked at other golden visa options between Portugal when they still had theirs available, but we were too slow. They shut it down pretty much a couple months before we were starting this process, where I think you just had to buy into like a $200,000 property and boom, you get citizenship and everything. Golden visas are great opportunities if you have the option to do so, as long as like it was an arm and a leg. For most of them, it's like $500,000 or $1 million for the rest. So some of those places were out of the question. Then we looked into places where she was able to still be a PA with a combination of warmer climate, along with other factors as far as, what's it called? Cost of living, happiness factor, and so forth, in which the happiest countries are the coldest ones. They have their reasoning, but we didn't want to do cold, so those were out of the question. The other options that she went through was Ireland and New Zealand because they recognized PAs and she was able to work there. But the problem is that it was either urgent care or family practice, I think is what she had mentioned. But they needed recent work history within the last 3 years of it. Now, Heather has about 8 years of urgent care experience under her belt, but because she had just recently switched over to weight loss or bariatric care, they didn't count that. They can't count it. It has to be within the last 3 years. So if you're a PA, thinking about your options with New Zealand, think about that one. Keep that in mind. Ireland was also looked into, but I can't remember what. I think it was the same case of she needed recent work history with it. Somewhere along the line, Heather received a letter in the mail, and it was her loans being forgiven, which was amazing news, because at that point it took, working as a PA off the table. So then it gave us free reign as far as which countries were options and so forth. Then we started deep diving into, Portugal, in which it was going to be a little hairy with the language, in which we would have definitely needed to go through the student visa. but I think theirs was the same issue with the family reunification. There was something that wasn't viable for us to use. Um, and we had just missed our golden visa opportunity. I can't remember. We had tried doing the business route, but it was some weird stipulations with it that we just kind of gave up on Portugal. So then we started looking back into Spain, and only because it had the Schengen visa, where you can travel visa free after you're a resident to like 20 some odd different countries or whatever, which seems appealing because we're going to travel and we're going to do it all. Is that all of the visa stuff? I think that's all the visa stuff that we went through. So again, a lot of decisions being made and options that were available. You kind of have to look at, you pretty much have to pick a country, go through that process as far as, what climate do you want to live in? Do you want to learn the language? Do you want to go into a more English speaking country, what have you, in order to pick the country first, and then look at the visa options available and fit and go with what fits. With what you have, play to your strengths, do what you can. But the information's out there. It's fairly simple to get into. Oh, I forgot. We also looked into Uruguay. I can't even remember why we were looking into Uruguay. I think it was it turned into a desperate attempt of being defeated with Portugal and Spain, and then looking up quickest countries or quickest visas for countries and so forth, because we just wanted to be lazy and just go, you know what, give us the easy right way out. Where can we go? We just want to go. And Uruguay fell into one of those categories. Seemed nice and everything. The area, the people, the culture all seemed wonderful. But then we got to reading about the Uruguayan winters, where it's cold and wet. And we saw pictures of people bundled up in like plush snuggies, essentially, because that was your winter coat because of the condensation. And it I don't know, it just seemed like we didn't want to do that. So Uruguay was off the table. But I like to tell everybody, as long as they haven't changed anything around that, an emergency, in case of emergency, Costa Rica isn't a bad idea because you require zero planning. You can just go. And then when you're there, you can talk to the embassy or the consulate or whoever to get an extended visa, and they extend it. They have the opportunity to extend it up to 6 months. And then before that time runs out, you leave the country, you come back, you can renew it for up to another 6 months, and you can do that perpetually. So it's a good escape route if anybody needs that. Along with, I think, and if you want to be a resident there, purchase a real estate to, get a golden visa is fairly cheap. But again, that information's out and about, and they may have changed things around, but when we were looking, that was our, in case of emergency, break glass here situation. But I like to tell everybody that because everybody at least needs an easy option if need be. We then miraculously landed back on Spain because it checked all the boxes, climate, the expat community, along with I have a little Spanish knowledge. healthcare situation, the opportunity for my kids to live abroad, learn things, have a different perspective and a global outlook on their life. Yeah, we figured it's best for them. So let's just do it. Let's just stick with Spain. And so far, it has been work trying to, get the whole process of trying to get the approval, getting the documents in order. That was work. But it's fairly simple if you know how to go about it. Like looking, and that's ridiculous to say now. Of course, it's easier now once I've been through the process, but it was a process to work through. Like I mentioned before, and if I haven't, like our attorneys didn't do right by us. And when we went to our first appointment, it was like they looked at the paperwork and turned us around within 5 minutes, and it was just like, no. But that's a story for another time. So the paperwork's doable. It's doable, and we will pass on that knowledge because it seems like a lot. It is a lot, but if you take it little by little and you know your time frame to work with, that is key. Because looking at it now, if I had known what I know now, we probably could have sped this up to maybe about 3 months' time. I've seen stories where people can get it done within 3 months, but they've probably had somebody hustling for them hard because it is doable, but it takes a little bit of extra elbow grease. But we're going to save that one for another day because I'm exhausted. We're trying to wrap things up and sell things on marketplace and eBay and everything else, along with trying to get the house together and work. And it's a lot, but we're getting there. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned for the next one.